All right, that was our break. So, hey, Camp Family Friends, we're going to keep rolling on. Welcome back to AACP Connect. And if you're just now joining us, we're glad you're here. I just saw a few more people jump on, so that's really great. Our panel discussion on running a COVID-19 safe camp. Those exist, right? We will be led by Dave Yeagley, the Executive Director of Sunset Lake. He's got 33 years of camp ministry experience, and he's also the previous AACP president. So it's an honor to have him leading us out. David, we are ready to begin, so take it away.
Great. Hey, thanks so much, Teresa. And it's great to be here. It's great to connect with all of you. And these are not the ideal ways that we like to connect. I missed the hallway conversations in our convention. We hope these panel discussions will kind of replace some of those around the table in the hallway conversations that we're missing during this time. We want this to be a two-way street. So please begin as we share putting questions into the chat, and that'll be helpful for us as we move forward. And we'll try to save a good amount of time at the end of our sharing to handle those questions. So you can begin putting those in as we go along. Let me begin with a reality check. I think all of us have been coming out of summer, and most of us did not run summer camp last year. We all said next summer we're gonna run camp. Next summer things are going to be different. Next summer, things will be back to whatever normal is going to be. But as we moved into fall and now heading into winter, and we're seeing a resurgence in cases, I think lurking in the back of all of our minds is the reality that next summer isn't going to be back to normal. And I know for some of us, even in the West Coast and other areas where restrictions have been pretty stiff, we're even wondering, are we going to be able to do it? At points like this, I think the best place to turn is to people who actually ran camp last summer. And there were, I think, about 6 or 7 camps across the North American division that ran last summer at some level. And those are really our experts right now. They're the ones that know how to do this because they've done it. We spent what was supposed to be about 45 minutes together, ended up being an hour and a half, talking with 4 different camps, and they're going to be on our call today. Dan Whitlow with Camp Cherokee, Ricky and Brooke from the Dakota camps, Jeff Wines from Camp Miveden, and Greg and Kim Taylor from Indian Creek. And we've got others. Ida Haven ran last year. Camp Asable ran. Kalakwa ran their horse program. Alamisco ran for a portion of their summer. So there are other camps. So we hope that you'll jump in as well. But these 4, Dan, Ricky, Brooke, Jeff Wines, Greg, and Kim, we spent a long time together. And what was fascinating in the conversation is they said, we've not had a chance to really debrief from this. And it was healing and therapeutic for them. Running camps in COVID is hard work. So I'd like to begin by just giving these camps a chance to give you a thumbnail sketch in just 2 or 3 minutes about what their summer was like and how they ran, what kind of program they ran throughout the summer. So that'll give us some context as we get started. So Dan Whitlow, let me start with you and tell us in 2 or 3 minutes what camp was like for you this summer.
Well, thank you very much, David. Yeah, your short meeting the other day it was quite long, but it was great for all of us on because we felt isolated in going through it, and so you didn't know where to begin either. I began, in New York. They cracked down pretty quickly, pretty hard. And so I was in almost weekly contact with our health department. Of course, they didn't know what was going on either. And so we were listening to briefings every day, trying to figure this out. The greatest help that came out was when ACA put out their guidelines, because we took that, and then CDC, and and other things, and the health department began putting stuff out too. But one of the big things for us was continuing to connect with the health department. That put them on our side. Instead of us being defensive, we were on the offense then, because we were setting the standard. We began sending ideas that we had that, hey, we can accomplish this and this is how we can do it. Because they were not going to come in and say, this is how you do it. They were bringing up the issues, but then we were putting forth ideas as to, hey, this is how we can get it done. You've been to our camp, you know that we have this area, and we can do this by moving this over there. And being proactive then and connecting with them helped them to say, hey, they're really trying to address this instead of saying it's no big deal. So while most of the state was shut down, we were spending time putting together a plan of action that we would follow as policies. And I can show you how thick my COVID book is. This is all our resources. There were 50 something pages from ACA, and then CDC, State Health Department, all that is in here. And the other day I mentioned it was 9, and when I went to send it in to Denison, and our policies are online. Denison is putting them up so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It ended up being 12 pages. I forgot I'd gone back and edited some things. But those things, those policies that we put in place then was how we could address the issues that were being presented to us. New York ended up not allowing children's camps to run. And so that placed us in a challenge, because then the next part of it was, can we do what they call temporary residence, which is our family camps and our retreats? Can we get that permit? It was interesting that our local state health department chapter began fighting for us because they knew what we were doing. They had in their hand our policies, and they believed we could do it safely. They began fighting for us with the state to say, you need to allow this camp to open in family camps and retreats. In fact, they are the ones that helped us connect with a state senator who ultimately got us the permission to open. And that was interesting to have the health department fight for us instead of against us most of the time. And then we had to follow those procedures to the letter. There were several, of course, the health department came, but they used our policies to go to other camps who wished to open. They would then compare, okay, what are you sending to us? What are your policies? And we became the standard. And our policies were used to say, can other camps open or not? Because they'd been on our site, they saw what we were doing, and we got creative. We couldn't have a children's camp. So we had a children's family camp where a parent or guardian had to come. And we couldn't do the counseling, but they could. So we got creative with it, and the health department backed us up. Of course, we had pictures taken and reports to the health department that we were breaking the law. We were open. We weren't supposed to be open. And we actually got a cease and desist order on our boats. And I had to call the health department, and they said, yeah, we had somebody complain. So if this is what you're doing, you're running without masks. I said, did you look back at our policies that you have? And they said, well, no. And I said, turn to this page. Now, what's it say? Well, you're not supposed to be around other people. I said, there's 6 feet. Our policies, we are following policy. When we're loading, unloading, the face coverings are used. When we're seated, notice we're 6 feet apart. Oh, I said, we're following that, and you approved that. Oh, yes. Ignore that. So that relationship that we had built and having them approve our policies helped us. They continued to get calls. and they would notify me of a call. You got another neighbor? I said, isn't it wonderful to have neighbors?
Yeah.
And because we were doing what we said we would do, our health department was telling callers of neighbors and whoever, no, they are following their procedures, which are following CDC and state guidelines. They are running safely.
Yeah.
And if we hadn't have built that relationship, I don't believe we would have been open this past summer.
That's great. And we'll have time to go back and look at more details. I want to give some other camps a chance. Dan, thank you. Ricky and Brooke, for these two, very first summer directing camp, can you imagine? Ricky and Brooke, tell us about, in a thumbnail sketch, what summer was like.
Hey everybody, it's good to see you. I'm Ricky, this is my wife Brooke. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, Dave. It was crazy. It was crazy, as you can imagine. Running camp during COVID was probably not the most ideal thing, but we're thankful that we got the opportunity to. So just, we don't want to take a lot of your time here, but basically we were able to run camp here in the Dakotas because, well, the Dakotas, there's not really like a lot of people. I think there's more cows than people actually here in the Dakotas. And so at the time, we actually didn't have a huge outbreak for COVID, which was great in the sense that we were able to run camp, but not great in the sense that we had zero direction from our health department. So we talked to administration. Basically, all the other camps in North and South Dakota were going to be running. We were more so on the conservative side, and quite honestly, we didn't want to run camp because we knew that even though we didn't have a lot of cases, we knew that eventually they were going to get there, because since North and South Dakota were open basically all summer and technically still are, we were going to have a lot of visitors. We have two camps. We run two camps, one in North Dakota, one in South. That one's right next to Sturgis. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it, where hundreds of thousands of people basically come together for a week, week and a half, 2 weeks, and come through. And so we knew, kind of looking forward, that that wasn't something that we wanted to do, but our hands were forced because all the other camps were opening. And so we sat together with our administration and we said, okay, fine, we'll do this as long as you allow us to do it at a smaller capacity. So we went with 65% capacity, which really helped us. But basically, because we had no direction, we had to create our protocols and procedures just for COVID. And that in and of itself took months, I would say, a really long time. And the sucky thing about that was that we didn't really know about the field guide, which took such a long time. I'm so upset about that because we found out about it way too late, where we could have just adapted a bunch of these things. And so we basically recreated the wheel and ended up being great. Like, praise God, everything was wonderful. And we basically did the same thing that the field guide told us to do, but it was just a time that we didn't necessarily need to kind of waste. But we did that, and thankfully we applied it. We gave it to our admin, they signed off on it, and basically we were ready to go. We basically based it off of like businesses and just really professional big businesses to see what they were doing with their employees. We based it off of local, state and federal government and institutions, and just applied that and ultimately became really good friends with all of them, which is really fun. To be able to partner up with the health department or to partner up with federal departments and to be able to do this together and have their support was really, really fun. But the issue was, at least for us, that the moment we started it, because of the huge political aspect of it, specifically here in the Dakotas, that's something that we definitely want to talk about later. That was the hardest thing for us this summer, the political aspect, that was running camp with or without masks, or with or without social distancing, to the point where during registration, we had a bunch of parents who came up to us and were super disgusted at the fact that we had to wear masks. And basically we told them, we said, listen, the only way your kids are going to be able to come to this camp is if you do this. So the only reason we get to have it is because we're following these protocols. If you want your kid to come, have them come, great. If not, I'm sorry. But this is what we're going to have to do. And so from the beginning, we had to be exceptional. We had to be extremely professional. We had to follow through and communicate everything with our staff. We had to be on the same page in order for everybody to take us seriously and for our camp to actually be a safe place where we could actually run it. And that ended up happening. We had staff come early 2 weeks. They quarantined before 2 weeks. They quarantined before they came to our camp for 2 weeks. Then we quarantined together for 2 weeks and then did camp. We had 3 days, 3 times a day where we did sanitation. Twice a day we did what do you call them? The checkups with the kids.
Temperature checks.
Yeah, our temperature checks and our screenings. Twice during registration, kids had to do 2 screenings, and then the third one once they actually arrived to camp. And so it was super, super thorough. We did not want to have any issues or fallbacks with that whole process. And so because of that, and because God is good, and because we got lucky, honestly, we didn't have any cases this summer. God is really good. We avoided anything like that. We had one scare, but nothing ended up happening with that. So that's just basically the bare minimum description of what we did this summer. But it was a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a ton of work. Thanks for that update. Jeff Wines, I want to give you a chance to give us a sketch of what camp looked like for you this summer. Is Jeff on the call? Let me jump over to Greg and Kim, because I'm pretty sure that they're there.
David,
there's Jeff. There he is. Jeff, tell us what summer looked like for you.
Yeah, basically a lot of similarities to what Dan and Ricky have already said. You know, our manual, the field guide for ACA was super beneficial, and we sat down and put that together. Again, you can get that on the website. Mine is quite a bit longer. Dan did a much better job, I think, probably narrowing it down. But we had to go through and basically reinvent camp. I think that's probably a thing I would say all summer long. I was just looking back and just saying, wow, every time I turned around, it was something different. I have to do this different. I have to do that different. Everything was changed. It was ridiculous, actually, and became exhausting. Some of the things that we did, well, first of all, I should probably say we run a camp where we have a youth camp, we have a family camp, and we also run what we call ultimate camps, and that's similar to an outpost camp. And so we ran all those this summer. We added to the ultimate camp and added another one because they're all self-contained and separate. And that was super beneficial because now you don't have people connecting with other people. And another piece we did, which was really helpful, is we divided people into internally what we called cohorts, so that you didn't have groups mixing with each other. So if somebody did get COVID, you could still keep part of the camp running, even if you got a group that did get COVID. So there's some of those things. Some of the other things that we did that were different, we did what I call a drive-by registration. Basically, nobody got out of their car. We did temperature checks. We, like Ricky said, we were doing quarantine of campers before they were coming. We were making sure they basically never got out of their car with the youth camps until the very end when they'd unload their luggage. And then the staff person would take them and the parents would stay at the car, couldn't leave from there. Actually, we got a lot of parents that said they really liked the idea of just being in the car and leaving. We moved everything we did outside, sleeping outside as much as we could. Our camp doesn't get a lot of rain in the summer, maybe an hour or two of rain all summer. That's not an exaggeration. So we moved everything we could outside, on decks, camping, everything we could do. We moved all the eating outside, or as much as we could get outside. So we started quite a few new things. And one of the things we found out at the end of the summer is a lot of people really liked what we did. They came up to us and said, please do this again. We love this. Probably the biggest thing we did, biggest shift, was we did a 5-day week instead of a 7-day week. And so for those of you that are not sure about that, it went wonderful for us. We had so many positive comments. No negative comments came back to me. Parents, campers loved it. There was a few teen campers that said, well, I'd like to be here a few more days, but they loved the 5-day week. So that was something we had never considered before. And this allowed us to take the weekend to have all of our staff have the same day off, reduce the amount of staff that we had to have, and also more time to clean the whole camp because we had to clean it so well all the time. You know, over the summer, some people have asked, well, did you get COVID? We didn't. We didn't have one case that we know of at camp. We did have one camper that got sick over the summer. This is a teen camper, and this was kind of wild. They got sick, and the day they got sick, the state changed how they were doing testing. So we literally could not find a place for that camper to get tested for, well, it could have been up to 7 days. We had multiple people in the medical community that helped us out, and we got it back within 24 hours. But that was only because we had a lot of friends in the medical community. So that was a big challenge. We had one staff person that got strep throat. And I would say because of mask, nobody else got strep throat. And the people that she was rooming with, etc. So that was a really good thing. Like Ricky said, masks were a major challenge. I had people that would argue with me to not wear masks. It was crazy. I had people email me saying, you've got to have everybody wear a mask all the time. And there were obvious places. You don't wear a mask when you're swimming. You don't wear a mask when you're doing major physical exertion. So, you know, those kind of things. And you would get both sides of this would just kind of come after you. So that was kind of crazy. I would say when it's all said and done, the team is super important. So whatever team you have, volunteers, full-time staff, whatever, working together, it was nonstop working for a long time. And then that team was connecting and expanding out to health departments. We connected with every other summer camp in our region to find out if they were running. So huge things that we did with the team. And last, I would say, is just a spirit of optimism. You know, God put so many opportunities. This wasn't oh, you can't do this. These were all opportunities that came, and it changed how we did camp. In fact, I will say that it probably changed how we did camp for forever, and most of it for the positive. So super exciting stuff.
Great, Jeff. Thanks so much. And we've got questions coming in. I appreciate those. We're making note of them as we go, and we'll get to those questions here shortly. I want to bring in Greg and Kim and have you get a sense for how they ran camp this summer. So Greg and Kim, tell us in a thumbnail.
Yeah, we'll be real brief because I know a lot of these things are going to be covered, but you know, kind of like a lot we can relate with what's been shared. But I think maybe the biggest question or the overall thing is, this probably was the most difficult summer we've ever done, and I think it's good to be honest and for you to expect that. But even though it was like one of the most difficult, the rewards of summer are always incredible for the staff, for the campers, for yourself. The rewards are always incredible. I would say, even though this was a more difficult summer to run, the rewards were even better. And depending on timing, I mean, our kids, the first people they saw other than their parents were their other camp staff. I mean, the timing of them coming to our camp to report. So, I mean, it was just an incredible, there was this shell shock, like I'm around people, you know, and we're about to do this. It was the first time. And just the spiritual need to give back from our staff, the ministry to our staff, like none other was huge. But anyway, we'll talk more about that. Tell them what we did.
So basically, we were still having restrictions here in Tennessee and realized that kids camp was going to be really difficult. And our administration at the conference didn't want us to run camp, period. And especially not kids camp.
Well,
and
they were split, but
yes.
Yeah, anyway.
But we explained that if they came for family camp, you know, they would be staying as a family unit. They'd be doing their activities together. And so
pick and choose a little bit more.
They could. And so we run 3 weeks of kids camp and 3 weeks of family camp and then a specialty camp at the end. This year we ran 4 weeks of family camp and we had 2 weeks for our staff ahead of time. same thing as what you've been hearing. We had that quarantine time. We had that time where we could clean and sanitize and get ready. And so that's how our summer looked this summer. And I know we'll go into more details in a moment, because I know Dave wants to cover everything.
Great. Hey, thanks, you guys. As we sat down and we looked at some key things, kind of key takeaways, and we want to briefly go through those, and then we'll jump in to some of your specific questions. Dan, I want to jump back to you. You held up your policy book there, and I think every one of you is mentioned the policies and the procedures. And by the way, there are links to those resource books that these camps have put together showing up in the chat. So jump on those and you can download their materials. You won't have to reinvent the wheel. And there's also a link to the ACA one. But Dan, talk to us about why that manual was so important. You alluded to it already. Was it worth all the work putting that together?
Well, it was worth all the work, because without it, we would not have been able to open, because the health department had no plan. Like everybody else, they didn't know what to do. And so they were asking, what is your plan? If we'd have said, well, we'll do whatever you tell us to do, it wouldn't have happened. But having a plan and giving it to them, that this is what we're prepared to do, gave them the confidence to say, we believe in you, you can go ahead. Without that plan, nothing would have happened.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and I think everyone, and if those of you who even thought about running camp, you began to realize that procedures were so important. Great news is ACA's done a great job, and these camps as well. So you've got some things to go on. Jeff, you mentioned this and several of you mentioned this, but talk to us about the importance of communication across all fronts, campers, staff, parents, county, and that just open transparency. What role did that play in your planning, and how important was that to you?
Yeah, communication was very critical. And in this context, and each camp has a different context, but in this context, some of the key players was to communicate to our treasurer, which is my direct report in the conference, consistently. We needed to connect with our board and our executive committee, our executive board meet as well. And so we were constantly communicating back and forth. I was spending a lot of time connecting with board members specifically, and of course, then our full-time staff. We have board members that are doctors, some lawyers, etc. And then that went outside of that, connecting with our union lawyer and rep, connecting with insurance and liability, with Adventist risk. And so each of those pieces would keep on giving another piece of the puzzle. Like Dan mentioned, within Idaho, they had no clue as to what they were going to do. I would literally call the health department up, and the lady, she would say, well, we don't know what happens in this stage. I don't have anything in my book. And so they didn't know what they were going to do. So we would create plans. The field guide was probably one of the most important pieces for that. And then we would communicate that and write that out to each person. So I would say, as far as communication goes, that was really important on that piece. Another piece was our staff. We started Zoom meetings as soon as we started finding out stuff. And we would have an open Zoom meeting with all of the staff. We didn't have a ton of them. We had about 3, 4, I think, something like that. And every time we would have that, we would let the staff know, look, if you can't come to camp, if you can't be in a bubble this summer, because they couldn't leave camp all summer, there was no options. So if you can't leave camp, you don't have to come and work here. You signed a contract already. We get that. We love you. No hard feelings. Apply next summer. And what happened is we've got a lot of staff that bailed out. Like I had about 20 staff that bailed out. And then I started getting staff from all over the country. Those of you that had to close down, some of your staff started calling us and applying at other camps. and we started hiring them. So that was another piece. The last piece I'd say is the campers. And we used our email a tremendous amount. We posted stuff on our website, kept on updating that. We would use Instagram, Facebook. So every way we could, we were communicating to campers. We literally called every single family camper. And just so you know, we run 4 weeks of family camps, and we did that this summer. And so we called every single one to connect with them. And it took a whole team to make that happen. There's no way one person can do all that. So we had an amazing team to communicate.
Great. Awesome. And I want to go then to talk with Ricky and Brooke. If you guys mentioned a challenge you had that I think all of us have experienced through this pandemic, going to the store and there's no toilet paper, there's no this or that. Talk to us about accessing supplies, the challenges that you had, and then maybe some resources that you discovered for accessing supplies.
Yeah, so obviously with COVID, there's just a lot of extra stuff that we needed this summer that we maybe wouldn't have needed in a normal summer. And so like before camp started, we actually ordered a bunch of those they're like spray jugs that you can pressurize almost for killing weeds in your yard, basically. And so we ordered like a ton of those to our camp before we got there so that we could mix concentrate in those so that we could basically just walk around like exterminators and just hose everything down all the time, which did make it a lot faster. So that was like something that did work really well for us. And we were able to get those on Amazon for pretty cheap. But as far as like the cleaning supplies themselves, that actually became really difficult to find stuff for because everything was limited to like only one of this item. And so you couldn't just go and like pick it up somewhere. And so there were a number of times where, so basically like our camp in South Dakota, the way that it has always worked, is that we don't get like a food supplier there. We like have to go to the town an hour and a half away and like get all the stuff from Sam's Club and then like bring it back up every week. And so, normally you could maybe get some of that stuff from like a food supplier like US Foods or Cisco, but since we didn't have that, we pretty much just were on our own to try to find it. And a lot of it was just not available. And so I was going to like a lot of hardware stores like Menards or Lowe's or places like that to be able to get like 1 gallon of this and then 1 gallon of this and things like that. So that was difficult. But then we ended up stumbling into this like safety company down in that area that really we were looking for med kits because unfortunately we didn't have much of that kind of stuff either going into the summer. And when we went to meet with the guy, he was like, oh, well, I have all this COVID stuff. And so we were able to get like cases of hand sanitizer and masks from that guy. And he had cleaning supplies that were available. So that was a big help to us to be able to find a person like that we could reliably get stuff from throughout the summer. Unfortunately though, because we do run 2 camps, like we got everything like established at our camp in South Dakota and then it was over and we were at our camp in North Dakota and we had to like start all over again. And the community up by that camp is much smaller and the bigger town is like further away from us. And so once we got up there, again, it was like the same thing all over again. Like we had to try to find this stuff from wherever we could get it, basically. And at our camp in North Dakota, we were supposed to get like shipments of food from US Foods, but something that happened to us was that US Foods, basically all their employees are like working from home. And so when it's the weekend, they're just off. And they also just had a hard time communicating within their own team about just correct information. And so they gave us some information that ended up being not true about when we could place our order and receive everything by. And so then I was on the phone with them a bunch of times and they couldn't really get it together. And so we actually ended up not receiving a shipment of food. Like it just, they said, well, we can't get it to you. And so we tried to arrange like a pickup and all this different stuff, and nobody was calling us back, and we were leaving dozens of messages. And it ended up that I just had to go to Walmart every day and pick up like enough food for like one day or a day and a half for our campers. And so we did that, and that was terrible, obviously. And that was something that was super unexpected that we didn't think of, I guess, as like a repercussion of COVID, is that a lot of these suppliers just, they're having problems and delays and stuff like that too. And so they were supposed to also bring us a bunch of like gloves and things like that for the kitchen and for cleaning. And since they didn't come, we couldn't get that stuff. And so we like literally ran completely out of gloves for our kitchen staff. And so I ended up in like a desperate act at a farm store where they had a lot of vet supplies.
Yay,
and
North Dakota.
So they happen to have rubber gloves for us to use in the kitchen. So I was able to get enough. I literally bought them out of, rubber gloves at the store there. And so we had to get really creative to try to find solutions to the problems that we had. And I think that like we were able to make it work because we're on the smaller side. But I think that like if our camps were bigger, these would have been crippling issues that like we wouldn't have had a solution to. And so those of you guys who do run bigger camps, like
start now.
You should probably think about what happens when US Foods doesn't bring us a week worth of food for our campers.
Start
like
now.
What are we going to do?
Suppliers for sanitation. Everything.
Like those things apparently will happen. And then you'll be, driving 2 hours every day to go to Walmart. So those are just a couple of things that happened to us this summer that hopefully next summer we'll have a little bit more foresight on to be able to manage.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I want to jump into some questions because we're gonna, I'm sure, need as much time as we can to handle those. And there's some that have already come in, and so I'm going to jump on some of these. Let's just start with a general question having to do with staffing, and we'll talk. We have another thing about camp recruiting coming up, but did you hire less staff this year, more staff, or the same? And even now, looking at what happened, as you're looking at next summer, are you looking to have to hire more or less, or where's your staffing going? I'm going to put that question out for any of the 4 camps that maybe has thought that through.
I guess I can start. We did the same amount of staff. We reduced, like I mentioned, we ran a 5-day week, so we reduced the amount of staff. But that being said, we had to hire more staff in other areas we hadn't thought of before. So we had to double the amount of staff for cleaning and supplies, for example. So yeah, we ended up with about the same.
About the same. Is that true for some of the rest of the camps here?
This is Dan. We hired the same amount. We actually had to pull staff to work in the kitchen because of the mandates of everything we had to do. Everything had to be individualized servings if it was placed out, or we had to serve it. And so salad bar, everything had to be served. So we needed staff to do that. Also, there was cleaning. We had staff assigned in crews to go around to all the buildings, sanitizing at a minimum of twice a day, if 3 times a day, if we could, every object that would be touched. And so that took personnel as well. So we had the same amount of staff, but we had less staff running our activities because of needing these other areas.
Great.
Much the same for us.
Yeah. And especially in the kitchen, because in the kitchen, normally we'll have some of our other staff come in and serve the food during the meals. We would have some of our activity staff help with that. And we couldn't do that this year because they had pretty strict regulations on the training, and they didn't want anyone, in there. So we had to have maybe just a few more staff this year.
And Greg and Kim, I'll toss this back to you because now that we're talking about cafeteria, The question came in: how do you handle the cafeteria with a 6 feet distance, with shared washrooms? What did the whole food service dining experience look like?
Good question. I'll speak to that a little bit here. We put tables outside, so we did a lot of outdoor seating, and we also spaced out the tables and staggered them. So if they did prefer to be inside, we had 50% capacity inside. So we staggered all the tables, spread them out. And we
had staggered
assigned
meal times as well, so that was nice. So
that the lines would be shorter and you could space out the people in line. And we assigned seating for family campers, and they loved it.
Yes.
So
that was unexpected.
That was their table. There was no cross contamination because they were coming to that table every time. And they loved it because the kids knew where to find the parents. They knew where their table was. And we had never done that before. And it shows that the innovations that we came up with this summer, that was one that they were like, please keep this, like assign our tables because we love this. And so that's how we kind of dealt with that. And as far as bathroom use, we made sure that we were cleaning them like constantly. And so and kind of trying to limit the number that we're going in there too. So
great. And I want to come back to you guys about innovations. We're going to talk about that towards the end, but there were some questions that came in for Jeff. You raised the whole 5-day week thing. And so I want you to give some clarification on that. Are you alluded to the fact that there are a lot of changes that you might be keeping. Is that one of them? Would you keep the 5-day week? And then how did that work? What days did you operate? And the third part of that question is, did that affect the price of camp? Did you charge less because you had less days? So Jeff, you want to answer that?
Those are good questions. So at this point, this is a moving target, which a lot of this is, as we've found out. We're continuing to learn and adjust as we move forward. But from what we've learned so far, we are going to do a 5-day week this next year. We kept the pricing the same. We had no pushback whatsoever on any of those issues. We started the 5-day week on Sunday evening, a little bit later. And so we normally would start around, I think it's 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We pushed it back to 4 o'clock, gave us a few more hours to be able to clean and to get ready for the next group. And then we ended on Friday at about 1 o'clock. So the campers had food before they went back home. And then the parents would come and get them, or in the case of what happened this summer, family campers would leave. At that point, then the staff would clean. At the first time we did it, the first week, we didn't know everything we were doing on the cleaning, so it took quite a while to detail clean the whole camp. By the second week, we were done by sundown. Well, we're in the north, so sundown's going down very late. And so once we're done at that point, the staff then went ahead and had worship. They led out in that. It was just for staff. And then they literally had all of Sabbath off. And until Saturday evening, we only served 2 meals on Sabbath. We served a brunch and supper. That was it. And then at worship on Friday evening, we started to do some discipleship training. Some of you may have heard of Ben Lundquist and what he did in discipleship training at Big Lake and or Java Pines. And so we started bringing some of that in there, and some of our full-time staff, including myself, spent some time going through different pieces of discipling our staff and having conversations with us and talking. Sunday morning, Saturday night was still off. Sunday morning, we went right back to cleaning, getting ready for the next week of camp and so forth. It's kind of how that worked. I saw somebody ask, would you keep it the same? No, I wouldn't. We'll keep the 5 days. But I would say that we start off, if we are able to let staff go into town, we would do that because that was a real hard psychological piece for them. And so instead of keeping them there, I'd let them go into town. And then we would end the day off on sometimes Sabbath afternoon, and then we would start doing some other types of training and spiritual growth that we would do for the rest of Sabbath and jump right back in on Sunday.
All right, great. How did you handle carryover campers, Jeff?
Well, COVID really helps with a lot of things. And I think all of us on this camp area, we just said, I'm sorry, we can't, it's COVID. And people were like, oh yeah, right. Okay. So that is pretty much how we handled it. It was COVID. I mean, we couldn't keep them. And so parents understood it and they went and did it. Now, some of you may have talked to a lot of other camps outside of the Adventist system of camping. And there's a lot of other camps that run a 5-day week. I didn't realize how many, but they're out there. And it's not an issue once everybody understands the system.
And the loss of Sabbath for your campers, you didn't see that as a negative that worked well for you. I mean, you talked a little bit about what Sabbath was like for your staff, but did that impact the overall spiritual impact to your campers?
No, I'd actually say it was a benefit. I can't tell you how many seminars myself has gone to. I think I've heard 3 of them by Ray and other people to try to figure out how to make Sabbath interesting. Everybody knows that runs camp, it's challenging at times to figure out Sabbath programming. And so this actually decreased the issues there. We ran our Friday night program on Thursday night. I kept on calling it Friday night all summer, but we ran that on Thursday night. And then we would do a wrap up on Friday morning. And I mean, we had so many kids that still made decisions for Christ. We had baptisms at camp. And so, all of those things still happen and we're engaged. I guess the last thing I would say is I can't tell you how many family campers said, we love a 5-day week and we are super happy to go home on Friday.
Great. Another question came in about lodging, and some of that's been answered in the chat, but how did all of you handle cabin capacities? Did you reduce capacities because of COVID? Did you run them the same? Anybody want to jump in on that?
I guess I can start. I'll say we kept them the same. We didn't have as many campers at camp, but we kept the numbers in the cabins the same because we put them in cohorts. And if you don't know what we're talking about, you really need to spend some time understanding the concept. Because if you keep a cabin together, they become a family group and they're not spreading it to other people. And so that concept works well. When it comes to families, it's not an issue. So that's where we were with that. And that didn't go against state laws.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. Is for family camp, it didn't, they were families, so that's not much of an issue. But we are hoping to do our kids camp this summer, and like Jeff said at the very end there, it's a lot of it's going to be dependent upon our local county and what's approved. And we're guessing it's probably going to be 50% capacity, but we're not going to make that call yet. But.
Great. Some questions on staff and days off and quarantining. How did you maintain the quarantine of your staff? What did days off look like? Did you keep them on site, require them to be on site the whole time? I think, Jeff, you've alluded that's what you did. Any other comments or answers to the questions about staff and quarantining?
So we didn't make our staff stay. We were very leery.
Well, they did the first 2 weeks, but
right, exactly. We wanted to make sure we were, all there, but we did allow them to go home on their day off if they wanted to, because a lot of them live within an hour or so of camp, and we just begged them and drove it into them that if they are taking, they know that they could possibly shut down the whole system by the choices they're making on their day off. And we just put the fear into them, said, please do not go into large crowds. If you have to get something at Walmart on your day off, make sure you're masking up, you're using hand sanitizer. We just drove it into them, and luckily we're COVID free.
Yeah, so we were basically the same. We allowed our staff to go off campus and have a day off or go home, but we actually had them sign a covenant with us, saying that we are part of the family, that we take care of the family, and that means that we take care of the world around us. And if that is the covenant that they chose to sign, then they had to keep that covenant with us and with the world. And thankfully, they all took it seriously. Because above at least us telling them, hey, you have to do this, it kind of spread out to saying, hey, like, we're a support system, we're a family. These are the things that we have elected to keep us together, that bind us together. And if you're a family member, you have to take care of each other. So that worked out really well for us. And everything just kind of followed through after that.
Awesome. Jeff, one more question for you on the 5-day camps. Did you have any issues with picking up kids on Friday that worked well for parents? Any issues there?
No, we didn't. Parents understood, and it worked really quite well. Parents came and got their kids, or they would, we do a busing system at our camp as well. So we did that, quarantined in the bus and all that kind of stuff, or I shouldn't say quarantined, separated in the bus. So parents would also pick up other kids, obviously let us know ahead of time and make sure everything was good. But that worked pretty well. And going back to the other thing that you guys were talking about is, as far as staff, we didn't send our staff home. They didn't get a chance to go home all summer. And that was different than maybe some of the other places. We're straddling 2 states. One state that is extremely locked down, Washington State, and the other that doesn't believe COVID exists, sort of, that's Idaho. So we have 2 extremes, and we somehow had to work with clients from both areas. So that was another piece.
Great. And a question on activities, and I'll open this up for all of you. How did you run activities? I know some of you ran in cohort groups, and you had a lot less ability to intermingle. How did your activities run?
For us, we had the requirement that everyone had to wear masks at activities. The only time in an activity was our water activities if you were actively in the water. So, or on the boat. Once you were seated on the boat 6 feet apart, then you could take your mask off. And but if you were in the water, you had to distance as well with your mask off. But otherwise, if you were within 6 feet or in a building, you had to have a face covering on.
All right, cool. Any other different ways of handling that?
Oh, ours was the same. We did not require masks outside, obviously, or for many, archery, things like that. But there are some, we did not offer like gymnastics class, which we've done in the past, things that actually require touching and, that kind of. And so we actually had to take some activities out, which was a little difficult because, some are very popular. But yeah, the 6 feet thing indoors, we actually did some of our ceramics outdoors and our crafts outdoors, and some of our, our super science is another department that we have. And so we just had picnic tables and canopies, and we get a lot of wind. So we bought a few canopies because they were destroyed throughout the summer, but we had a lot outside.
Great. There was one last question that came in. I want to jump to, because I think it's important. I mean, having gone through a summer, and we'll talk about the impact of that in the last couple of minutes, but having gone through a crazy summer, reflecting on it, is there one thing that you say, oh, next year, if we're in this again, we're doing this differently? What would that be?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we missed kids camp. Loved our family camps, and we had a lot of kids that came at family camp, but definitely the kids camp aspect does such a blessing, such a period of growth for our counselors. And so at all costs, we're going to do our best to make sure we have kids camp this summer.
Yeah. What about the rest of you? What would you do differently?
I think for us here in the Dakotas, the biggest issue that we had in the past, and ultimately was highlighted this year, was the fact that since we run 2 camps, we don't really have a transition week. So we go from one camp, drive up 10 hours, and then start the next camp. And with COVID and getting the camp ready with COVID, I wish I could curse on here. It sucked. It was terrible. And so we worked it out to actually give our team a week transition, so that we, outside of days off or whatever, we have a whole week in the middle of the summer where they can relax, where they can be, where they can enjoy the boats, everything for themselves, and just kind of get back to a state of being able to work and laugh and enjoy, but ultimately to continue to take their job seriously, especially because COVID's going to continue to be a thing, we believe, up until 2022. And so just to give them that time to rest and to heal and to talk and to just be rejuvenated is something that we really need them to do, because this year was exhausting, absolutely exhausting.
And so like, obviously I think every conference is probably having some type of financial trouble throughout the pandemic, just because, you know, people aren't meeting in churches right now. And so basically like 2019, our conference had a really bad year financially because of agricultural reasons. And then obviously 2020 hit, and it's been, you know, what it is. And so, this was our first year running camp. And so we like decided how many staff that we wanted to hire, which was actually about the same number of staff that had been previously hired to run camp. And then we got there and we had all these staff to, you know, to run the camps that we had. But like we were pretty much maxed out at the number of people that we could hire. Like our conference was almost a little bit uncomfortable with hiring as many people as we did and only running at 65% capacity. But I think that next year, it probably won't be able to happen because of finances, but we would love to, if it were possible, hire a few extra people actually, because the increase in like sanitation and cleaning and how many jobs everybody has to have because of all the extra stuff that has to get done was so intense on our staff that by the time we even transitioned up to the second camp, it was just crazy. And like the like intensity of literally packing up an entire camp into a trailer and hauling it 10 hours up and then unpacking everything and like starting all over again by the time you just got organized and like figured out what the heck to do was like so difficult.
Yeah.
And then just with the added stress of everything that everyone had to do and relearning all of those processes with new facilities was just too much, I think. And so if it were possible for us, which I don't think it will be, unfortunately, we would love to hire like another 3 or 4 people for next summer just to specifically help in the kitchen and with sanitation where those extra pieces are needed.
Good. We're down to the last couple minutes here, and there are a few questions that I'd encourage our panelists here to maybe jump on the chat and address. Questions like how many masks did campers bring? Did you launder them for them, or just replace them? What did you do on rainy days? You know, when you got to be indoors. So watch the chat, jump on and do those. One thing I'd like to address briefly before we pray is that I heard from every one of you, and I think some of us even that didn't run camp felt this. I think we need to acknowledge that something happened this year, and what we've been through has been really hard. And every one of you talked about the exhaustion that you felt, the loneliness that you felt, the isolation that you felt. Ricky and Brooke, you guys talked about coming back after camp was over and realizing that nobody understood what you'd been through. Nobody really got the incredible stress you'd been under. Don't do this alone, is I guess what I'm hearing from this group. As we head into next summer, don't think that you've got to be the hero and get out there and do this. Find the camps around you that are in this together. Start communicating, get prayer groups together. We want to end today with prayer. And Ricky, I think it was you that said, hey, we really need to be praying for the camps that didn't run last year and are considering to run this year. And so as we wrap up here and bring this to a close, Ricky, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to pray for us and for the camps that are considering to run next year, and just pray for wisdom and guidance.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's pray. Father in heaven, I know that we have spent the last hour just talking about the people who got an opportunity to run camp during COVID, and it was crazy. It was depressing, especially coming back. But God, we also want to lift up those people who didn't get a chance to have camp this summer. I know I've been only doing this, and Brooke has only been doing this for literally one summer. I can imagine everybody else who's been doing it for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years to not have a summer, and the grieving process that they went through not having kids at their camps. I don't know what their experience was like, just like they don't know mine, but I really want to lift them up in prayer as well. That God, you would heal them, and that you would give them hope that this year will be different, and that as we continue to find out what this whole thing is going to be this next summer, that we would prepare ourselves like you have called us to, that we would submit ourselves like you have called us to, that we would be the professionals that you have called us to, that we would take our job super seriously and go beyond what people are asking to make sure that our camps are going to be the safest and most spiritual places like you have called us to. Be with the grieving process that people have had this last summer, including us and those that didn't get a chance to have camp. But God, we pray that something crazy would happen, that you would prepare all of us, that you would prepare our nation to be able to get back to a place where normalcy can start. And may it start with us, with the way that we work towards bridging division, towards bridging communities, and ultimately continuing to lead kids, campers back to you, and ultimately families back to you. So anoint these places, anoint these directors, anoint their staff, give them energy, give them drive, and may they devote themselves to you moving forward. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, everyone. Teresa, I'll hand it back to you.